Hi, this is the live sexuality Q&A broadcast. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of time for people to jump in. So if you're watching this, come on in, come watch our live sexuality broadcast. I'll spend a little bit of this time introducing myself as people join this chat. I believe that this video will be recorded and downloaded so that anyone who isn't able to be here right now watching the Q&A will be able to watch it in the future. So if it's Shabbos and you're still in the closet and you can't access your phone or a computer, this is still information that you will be able to access in the future. I'm not sure how to tell if people are watching this. Maybe it says I've got 4 viewers. Oh, great. Okay, so people are watching this. This is great. So I'll start and introduce myself. My name is Galia Godel. I have a master's in education in human sexuality. So I work as a sexuality educator. My day job involves working as a sexuality specialist with adults with intellectual disabilities. And I spend a lot of time working about social skills and dating and boundaries and a lot of actually the things that we're going to be covering today. They're applicable for a number of people. So the way that this is going to work is I have an outline over here about a bunch of topics that Henny and Joel asked me to cover, just given their familiarity with your community, and also things that I feel are important as a sexuality educator to share with you guys. And also, we've got this comment bar here on the right. If somebody actually wouldn't mind just maybe writing hi and hitting it as a comment, just so I can make sure that I can see your comments as they come up, that would be very helpful, and I would appreciate that. So if I don't see a hi or hello in the next minute, then I might futz around a little bit to see if I can figure out how to see your comments. Great. Okay, I see that hi. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So just to let people know, oh, wonderful. The way that this is going to work, so many highs, I love it, is I'm going to go through my outline and just sort of give you guys information that I think is important for people to know. And if at any point while I am speaking, you have a question either based on something that I said or something you've been holding inside and you're wondering about or that feels applicable to your daily life, feel free to type that into the comment box. I will read the comment out in case we have anybody watching this in the future who's visually impaired and isn't able to see the comment, but I will not read your name out loud. So this video, when it is saved in the future, will not contain your name. The only person whose name is attached to it is going to be mine. We've got some more people. I'll introduce myself again one more time and then we'll get started. So for the folks that are just coming in, hello, my name is Galia Godel. I am a sexuality educator in the Philadelphia area. I work with adults, and I also work with child learners, mostly in the Reconstructionist and conservative movements. And I'm here to talk about human sexuality. So I'll get started. Something that a couple folks asked for information about is about LGBTQI and A identities. That's a whole bunch of letters, and I'm going to go through all of them. Don't worry. In fact, let me put them into the comment box right now, just so everyone, made sure that I was very clear about them. So LGBTQIA. That is a whole spectrum of different kinds of sexual and gender identities, and I'm going to go through those letters just to let people know what they are and tell you a little bit about what ways that you can interact with people under those identities when you're out in the secular world, where people feel more comfortable identifying with these different identities. I understand that those are not identities that people feel comfortable expressing in the Orthodox world, but A, you might encounter people who are part of those identities in the future out in the secular world, and B, it might feel like one of those identities, one or more of those identities, resonates with you. So this is information that could be helpful in a number of ways. So the first of those letters is L, which stands for lesbian. It's a word you might have heard before. And generally a lesbian is a woman who is sexually or romantically attracted to other women. Now, women does not just mean someone who was born a woman and currently identifies as a woman entirely the whole way. A lesbian can be any person who calls themselves a woman, who is in love with or enjoys sexual relationships with anyone else who calls themselves a woman. And I will come back to that calling yourself a gender thing in a moment. The next letter is G, which is gay, which often is used to refer to a man who is in love with or have sex with other men. But also gay is sort of a bit more of an umbrella term, and people who are lesbians will also call themselves gay. Both of those words correspond with homosexual, which is someone of one gender being attracted to people of that same gender. The next letter in that spectrum is B for bisexual. And there are sort of two definitions for bisexual, and each person who calls themselves bisexual gets to decide which of those definitions is most important to them. So the two definitions of bisexual, one is someone who is attracted to the two genders, male and female. And bisexual is also used to mean someone who is attracted to the same and other genders. So that's where that bi prefix comes in. The same is one, and others is the other gender. And one of the reasons that that distinction is important is that there are people in this world who identify as neither male nor female. There are a lot of identities under that umbrella. And if somebody asks, I'm happy to go into that a little bit more. But again, this is just sort of a 101 right now, so I won't delve too deep unless someone is particularly curious. But so there are people who don't identify as male or female, and so someone bisexual who would say that their definition of bisexuality includes being attracted to the same and other genders is saying that they could be attracted to somebody who isn't just male or female. That's where that other genders come in as opposed to the opposite gender. So there is a little rundown on bisexual. The T stands for transgender, and someone who is transgender identifies as a different gender than what they were assigned at birth. Some people use words like a man trapped in a woman's body or something like that, which can occasionally be offensive because let's say there is a transgender man, then that man doesn't feel as if he is trapped in a woman's body because it's his body. And so we would just say that that person was assigned female at birth, but now identifies as a man, and this person is a man. So if someone who is transgender tells you what their gender is, then that's really all there is to it. If someone says, hello, you know, my name is Alana and I'm a woman, even if they don't look like a woman, it's no penalty to you to say, I don't believe you, you look like a man. It's very respectful to say, you know, thank you for telling me what your gender is, or not even say that, just say, hi, Alana, it's nice to meet you, and carry on from that. If you're at a woman-only event and someone comes in who doesn't look like a woman, but they say that they are a woman, then the best thing for you to do is to believe them. It might be very difficult for them that they don't look the way that they want to look, or that they don't look the way that society tells them that they should look. So the best bet is really just to accept the identities that people tell you that they are. There was a very interesting halachic case, actually. I really wish I could remember the specific rabbi that ruled on it, and I apologize. I just sort of came across this in my reading a year or so ago. But the ruling is based off of, I think it's the moment that Elijah ascends to heaven and becomes an angel, and there is sort of this concept that all angels are female, and so Elijah's wife, who was still on earth, was married to someone who had ascended and become a woman, and therefore that marriage was nullified, because at that time marriages between women were not valid. And a rabbi slightly closer to modern times looked at this case in halakhic memory and said, oh, well, of course, seeing as this woman's marriage was nullified because she was married to someone who had become a woman, who had become a female angel up in heaven, it is therefore legitimate that someone can transition genders, even Orthodox Judaism, because we have a record of it happening and being validated, and that marriage being nullified. So there is a little bit of interesting basis for the validity of transgender identities, even in Orthodox Judaism. I know it doesn't happen very often in the community, but you will see it a lot more out in secular living. And so again, the quickest and best way to be respectful is when somebody tells you what their name what their name is or what their pronouns are, absolutely respect it and not nitpick at it. It's not really your business. Oh, someone just said it was Rabbi Eliezer Tzvi Waldman, known as the Tzitzit Eliezer. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I'm going to write that down for the future, so I make sure to have that name. So wonderful. I love that information. So I'm going to go a little bit back to my LGBTQIA and finish up those letters before we move a little bit further down my agenda for the day. And again, people who just came in, if you have questions at any point, just pop them into the comment box. So we've already done LGBT. Q stands for queer or questioning. So I'll do questioning first. Questioning is anyone who sees this spectrum of different letters or different identities and wonders if that might apply to them. And that is incredibly valid. You do not have to make up your mind 100% at that moment. You get to try different identities on. There are people who are not sure if they're trans, and so they maybe dress a different way for a while and ask people to call them by a different name or by different pronouns to find out if it feels right to them. Or someone is trying to figure out if they are a lesbian or if they're bisexual or what have you, and they get to try that out. And so someone who is questioning is figuring out what their identity is, and that person still falls under that umbrella of LGBTQIA identities because they're going to have the similar relationships with alternative lifestyles and alternative identities. The other meaning of Q is for queer. And queer was known as a very long time for a slur, but it originated in the gay and transgender community. Queer is a little bit of an umbrella identity, and it's a little bit easier of an explanation. Some people have very complicated identities. They might say, I am bisexual, but I only fall in love with women, and I'm transgender, and I'm asexual, which I'll come back to in a second. And so instead of saying all of those complicated things, the word queer sort of acts as an umbrella. I will warn you, if you do not identify as one of these identities, it is possible that someone who is LGBTQI or A may take offense to you using the word queer. It's a little bit of an in-group term. So people who are queer can call themselves queer, but it can be seen as a slur. Really, your best bet is to mirror the language that somebody uses to introduce themselves to you. So if someone were to say, you know, hi, my name is Dov and I am a transgender gay man. Great, those are the words you're going to use. But if somebody says, you know, my name is Bracha and I'm a queer woman, great. And you can use the word queer when talking to that person. So mirroring is a very common term. It's something that we use in education and psychology. So it's just what you're going to use when someone describes what they are to you as well. The next word, the next letter in that acronym or mishmash or what have you is the letter I for intersex. Someone who is intersex was born with ambiguous genitalia or chromosomes. And this isn't something that you're just going to see out on the street because generally people don't walk around with their genitals out saying, oh, look, I have ambiguous genitalia. That's something that you might find out from a partner, someone that you're going to have sex with or someone that you're very close friends with. Intersex sort of pride and identity has risen a little bit more lately, because for a very long time, the accepted response to a child being born with ambiguous genitalia was to perform surgery upon the infant to correct their genitalia to look like one sex or another, despite the fact that it wasn't medically necessary. So something that's happened a little more is the acceptance that a child can grow up with ambiguous genitalia and figure out what their gender or sex is, just sort of based on how they want to grow up and what they decide that they are. And like we mentioned earlier, there's some people who don't identify as male or female. Some intersex people as well say, well, I have ambiguous genitalia, I have an ambiguous gender as well, so I don't really need to pick one or the other. And the last letter is A, which stands for asexual or aromantic, a little less commonly, but also in existence. Someone who is asexual does not experience sexual attraction. They're not broken, they don't need to be fixed. It's not that they haven't met the right person and maybe they'll like sex or that they had bad sex. Some people are just not interested in having sex at any point in their lives, or they're happy to have sex with a loved one because it makes that loved one happy, but it doesn't really do much for them specifically. there are really a number of things that fall under sort of this broad spectrum of asexuality. Sounds a little bit like a plant, like, you know, a plant reproduces asexually or something. But it's for people too, and it's not just about reproduction, it's also about attraction. So if you interact with someone or encounter someone who says that they are asexual, again, that's just something you go like, great, that's your choice. You don't need to offer to fix them. You don't need to hook them up with the right person. Sometimes people are just not interested in having sex. And unless you're dating that person and you specifically want to have sex with them in the context of a romantic relationship, it's not your business. So not that you shouldn't be curious about it if that person is someone that you're close with, but it's not your business to question them and press them and find out what's wrong with them. So something that isn't quite on that spectrum of LGBTQIA are, that was me, R-A-R-E, not the letter R, it's not another letter, are non-binary identities. And I'll just quickly go over this again. It's just people who don't identify as male or female. There are a number of different ways that people could not identify as male or female, and that's fine. I will very quickly now explain the difference between gender and sex, and like gender orientation and sexual orientation, or gender identity and sexual orientation. Again, this is maybe delving a little bit deep into alternative identities, but there are things that might come up in your life and people that you might meet, and you're not sure how to have conversations with them about it. So just very quickly, the difference between sex and gender is sort of the difference between body and mind. So although there is a lot of ambiguous genitalia and trans people, generally we see male sex as someone who has a penis and testicles, and we see female sex as someone who has a vagina and a vulva and a uterus. And so that's the only difference there. That has only to do with sex and bodies and has nothing to do with the gender that somebody feels that they are. You cannot tell what someone's genitals look like when they are dressed or wearing, you know, makeup or not makeup or anything like that. So the next, so sort of the flip side to sex is gender. Someone identifies as either a man or a woman. So we spoke a little while ago about the word transgender. Now the opposite of someone who is transgender is someone who is cisgender. Cisgender is spelled C-I-S-G-E-N-D-E-R. I check really quick in my head. And it's just basically the chemical prefix. There's sort of the trans prefix in chemistry, and there's the cis prefix in chemistry, and cis means the same. So someone who is transgender was born being told that they are one sex, and they have transitioned. They are another gender in their, you know, later years as they figure out what gender they really are. Someone who is cisgender is the same gender as their sex. The way they were born, that is how they identify now. So sex and gender are different in that way. One has to do with the body and one has to do with who you really are. I have a lot of feelings about gender as like a social construct, but that is a little bit deeper of a delve than we need to go into right now, unless someone wants to speak with me one-on-one or to ask me more questions about it. So again, the basic rule of thumb is just to let people tell you who they are and for you to believe them. That's the best part. Being transgender has nothing to do with sexual orientation. So someone can be a transgender woman and a lesbian. They're not a man in denial because they actually love women. The gender that you are, that you believe that you are, the way you want to dress and present yourself and feel, is not terminologically related to the gender that the gender or genders that you are attracted to. So someone can be trans and also lesbian, gay, or bisexual. They're not related to each other. Pardon me, I'm just going to take a sip of water because I'm doing quite a lot of talking. All right. So that was our brief primer on LGBTQIA identities, on queer identities. Again, if you have any questions about those, pop them right into the bar on the right, and I'll read them out loud without including your name. Something I'm going to move into a little bit right now is sexual health. It's a total different topic. We have a number of different subheadings here. We're going to talk about sexual health. Just to let you guys know, I'm also going to be talking about things like social boundaries, how to indicate interest or disinterest socially, romance, a lot of things like that, and safety, both emotional safety and physical safety. The first thing I'm going to talk about is sexual health and physical safety when it comes to sexual health. If you get to the point, oh, someone just messaged me. I see. Oh, there's some questions. But I think there are questions in another screen. Pardon me just a moment as I try to find them. I'll talk while I look for those questions. It would be very helpful for folks if they posted them in the Facebook Live chat. I think that is the easiest way for me to see them. Yeah, I don't think I see those questions that you're mentioning. So if someone is able to post any questions in the Facebook Live chat, that would be the easiest way for me to see them because I don't see them popping up somewhere else. Oh, I see in the second tab. All right, sorry folks, just give me 1 second while I look for these questions from somebody else. I want to make sure that I am getting them. Oh, there's an entire conversation here. I am so sorry, I did not even, why are they not popping up in my screen? Give me just a sec while I look for them. That's very bizarre. I guess I'm just going to keep both screens open so I can make sure that I see all the questions. Sorry about that. So before I jump into the next topic, then I'm going to address these questions that I got. Thanks so much for pointing them out to me. So let's see. Why would someone prefer to identify as queer than bi or their specific gender? So the reason that somebody might want to prefer as queer rather than bisexual, again, is just sort of for community cohesion purposes and for a combination of language. So someone might be bisexual and that feels like a really validating term. And in fact, people can identify as more than one thing. I know people who call themselves queer and bisexual, but queer again is that sort of umbrella term. So if you have a number of people who are bisexual, lesbian, gay, intersex, etc., then you might have a queer group where all of these people spend time together. So for example, in the city where I live, there's a queer knitting circle where just people who have a lot of different queer identities come together and knit every week. I am the leader of the LGBTQ social group at my synagogue, and we just call ourselves the Queer Havara because we meet up twice a month for Shabbat dinners and potlucks and queer Torah study. And it's a little bit easier than being like, oh, well, if you're, questioning, you can't join us, or like if you're asexual, not okay, in case we didn't have all of the letters listed out every single time. So we use queer again as just sort of a community gathering term. And also it's, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit easier to say sometimes. I'm going to use some complicated, like someone might be panromantic, asexual, living in there are a lot of different identifying words. I really just gave you the most basic identifiers. And instead of going into all of those little details, every time you meet someone new, you just say, hi, I'm queer. You're queer too? Okay, we're both queer. So that's one of the reasons someone might want to use the word queer, even though it was known as a slur for a while. Another word that somebody asked about is pansexual. So pansexual, I didn't mention this earlier, but I imagine this person heard it sometime, is a little bit like bisexual, but someone who is pansexual is attracted to all of the genders. There's not a fundamental difference in being bisexual and being pansexual necessarily. They're not opposing identities, but someone who is pansexual might be attracted to men and women and genderqueer people and gender fluid people and agender people. These are all different gender identities that I'm tossing out there that if you're curious, I can also mention. So that is why someone might identify as pansexual, to just make it very explicit that they are attracted to all genders. This maybe says there are a lot more comments that I am not seeing. I hope they're all popping up. Either way, I'm gonna keep talking. So someone else asked, when is it the right time to tell someone about your identity when you meet another person? How long do you wait? And I think the answer to that really depends on safety and comfort. Each person gets to make their own decision about when it feels comfortable and right to share their identity. And so if you are in a safe situation where other people are young or open or communicative, that might be part of the way that you identify yourself right away when you introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Galia, I'm a queer woman living in Philadelphia, is a way that I might introduce myself. But if I'm at a business function where, first of all, my sexuality isn't relevant, and second of all, I might not feel safe, that might not be something I bring up. So it's not, I don't want to say it's an inappropriate thing to divulge anytime you meet somebody new, because your queer or gender or sexual identity is not ever inappropriate. But sometimes it isn't relevant to come up, just like someone might not come out as heterosexual every single time you meet with them. It doesn't, they don't necessarily walk into a business dinner and say, like, hi, my name is Bracha and I'm a heterosexual woman and I'm married to a man and we have sex. That's not necessarily something that comes up all the time. So it's really a judgment call, which I know is a tough thing for me to say because judgment calls can be difficult, but you just need to make sure that the place you are is safe and people won't discriminate against you or say unkind things to you. Again, unless that might be what you're looking for, if you want to make sure that people are going to respect you. So you might say, hi, I'm asexual. And if somebody says something nasty to you, you can be like, great, I'm not going to interact with you again in the future. Or they might be ignorant and they say something nasty and you go, why would you say that? I think you need a little bit more information about this. So it's really a case-by-case situation about when is the right time to tell someone your identity. There's not really a better answer. Something I would advise, if you feel as if you fall under one of these letters, LGBTQIA, or you're pansexual, or non-binary, any of those things, is to find a community of people who are also queer. There's a good use for the word queer right there. Instead of me saying, if you're lesbian, you better find other lesbians. Probably if you're a lesbian, you're going to be well understood by someone who is bisexual or someone who is intersex because they also face discrimination on similar levels from society. So queer is just a nice use, sort of a lasso word there. You want to find a queer community that understands what you're going through and can talk you through some of these difficulties. Because again, I'm just sort of talking to the group right now. I don't know everyone's one-on-one situation. So if you want support for your individual identity, you should find other queer people to help give you that support. So I'm just going to refresh this page to see if any other questions have popped up about this topic. It doesn't look, I see that there are 30 comments. I'm feeling a little frustrated that these comments aren't popping up for me. I'm not exactly sure what the best thing is to do to make sure that I see all of these comments. I don't have the answer. Oh, I see. Let's see. Someone said, all right, someone asked safety and comfort or interest. What if I'm not interested, or what if I don't believe that I have to identify it, that I have to announce it? Do straight people announce their sexual orientation? And that's a great question. Again, the answer is no. You don't ever have to announce it. It is totally up to you. No one ever has to divulge an identity where they don't want to. And it's not even that you're keeping a secret or staying closeted. It is often not relevant to the conversation to come out with your queer identity. You never have to share anything you don't want to, ever. That's totally your comfort. That's what's most important, your comfort and safety, or relevance, like you said. Great, so that basically covers what I believe are the questions I see about sexuality and gender. If anybody has any more, I'm just going to keep sort of scrolling through these windows to make sure I'm not missing any questions because it looks like they're on a couple of different tabs. A little confusing, but I'll figure it out. I am going to move on to sexual safety, just because this is a topic upon which there's medical information. A lot of the other topics are sort of social or opinion-based things that I've picked up as I work as a relationship coach sometimes, pardon me. I work as a relationship coach for my clients. So a lot of social things are sort of situational, but sexual safety is objective. There are safe and unsafe ways to do things. So something I'm going to tell people, I imagine some of you have this information, but some of you might not. So again, if some of this feels very rudimentary or basic and you already know it, remember not to roll your eyes because different people have been transitioned into secular lifestyle for a longer time than you and might not have that information yet. So it's really important that we remember that different people have different levels of sexual information that they have. So something that can happen when you have sexual contact with another person is something called a sexually transmitted infection, which used to be called a sexually transmitted disease. And people call those STIs and STDs. You'll see them both. They're both commonly used The more accurate medical term currently right now, 2017, is an STI, a sexually transmitted infection, just because a disease is sort of an unpleasant word that doesn't actually encompass all of the different things that can be transferred sexually. A sexually transmitted infection can reside in a number of places. Generally, your mouth or your genitals is where you might have a sexually transmitted infection. They can have a number of different symptoms that include redness or itching or sores. They can affect your reproductive health. People who have uteruses, if they get a sexually transmitted infection and don't treat it for long enough, it can damage your uterus and cause you to become infertile or have chronic pain for the rest of your life. There are a lot of negative things that come with having a sexually transmitted infection. Some are curable, some are not. There's a whole list. I'm not going to go through the whole list and all of the symptoms of each. You can really Google symptoms of common sexually transmitted infections. Something that is important is, number one, if you feel anything is wrong or uncomfortable in your genitals or in your mouth after you've had sex with somebody. If you've never had sex with anybody, you're probably okay, and you might have an illness that is different than a sexually transmitted infection, just to put that out there. But if you've ever had genital contact with somebody, it's possible for you to have a sexually transmitted infection. And they're very common, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you have one. I will say there is something that is a sexually transmitted infection that most people in the United States have, and that is a cold sore. If you've ever had a cold sore on your lip, which, by the way, statistically is very common in Orthodox communities, that is actually the herpes simplex virus type 1. And so that is literally herpes on your mouth, but it's okay. Everyone understands that people get cold sores and it's not this huge stigmatized thing. You should just try not to pass it on. So if you have or suspect that you have a sexually transmitted infection, an STI, the two things you have to do right away are stop having sex and kissing people until you figure out what's going on, and two, go to the doctor. A doctor will help you figure out what's going on, and whether it is a curable STI or a manageable STI is sort of how we talk about it. Things like herpes are not curable. You can't get rid of it. You have it forever. But that's okay, because you can take medication to manage your symptoms and make it so it's very unlikely for you to pass it on. Similarly, if you have HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, that's something that is also incurable. You have it forever. Medication can help you manage it. So if you notice something wrong with your body, go to your doctor right away. If you have current sex partners or have recently had sex with somebody, and your doctor diagnoses you with a sexually transmitted infection, you have to tell them. You have to, you have to, you have to. It's absolutely essential, because you might have passed a sexually transmitted infection on to somebody, and then they might pass it on to their partners. It is the most important responsibility of finding out that you have an STI to try to stop it in its tracks, to help as many people as possible. I know relationships end and people get mean and people get mad and people lie. These are things I understand. I'm not super fine with them, that they happen, but it is absolutely necessary that you inform people when you have an STI. There's a question here on the right that says, how can we cope emotionally with an STD, given that we come from a culture of blame and guilting? And that sounds like a difficult thing that you might want to talk to some friends about if they're people that you trust. What's really important to remember about STIs is that it is in no way a value judgment. Absolutely, it's not a value judgment. It's just like a cold. If you're standing in an elevator with someone and they sneeze and you get a cold, it is simply the manner in which viruses and bacteria travel. The fact that it is connected to sex is one of the reasons that we see a lot of shame around having STIs or STDs, is because it's connected to sex, and we shame sex in our society, both secular and religious. There are just so many societies that make sex seem to be something bad or dirty or wrong, where it's not. Sex is great if you like it. So the most important thing to remember is, if you have an STI or an STD, that it's not your fault. You didn't do anything stupid. You're not a bad person for having an STI. It's simply a thing that happens to your body. If you, again, like if you caught strep throat because your coworker coughed near you, that is exactly the same as if you had sex with somebody and you caught chlamydia. You go to your doctor, you take care of it. you fix it, or you try to manage the symptoms if it's something chronic. It has nothing to do with your worth as a person, but you have to be honest about it. If your partner has an STI, first of all, as long as they're truthful with you about it, don't blame them about it. Don't be like, oh my gosh, you're dirty. I can't believe you have an STI. I'm never going to touch you. You do get to make the decision about whether or not you want to have sex with someone who has an STI or an STD. That is fair. That's your right. If somebody has genital herpes and you feel too worried about catching it and they disclosed to you, they told you that they have herpes, then you get to make the decision not to have sex with them because they have herpes. But please be kind about it. They know that they have this infection that is it's going to stay with them forever. They probably already feel pretty yucky about it. The best thing to do is just to be honest and say, listen, I don't blame you. You're not a dirty person. I feel too nervous about catching this STD to have sex with you, but please do not take that as a personal value judgment. You should really be kind. If someone has lied to you and given you an STD, you can be pretty annoyed at them for lying to you. But again, it's not about being dirty. So one thing you can do, if you have a new partner, is you can make sure that they have been recently tested for STDs. And the way that you can do that, it really depends on the city you're in. You can go to your primary care physician or your gynecologist and ask them for an STI panel. Just a whole range of tests to make sure you don't have any of them. They don't often test for herpes. You'll probably know if you have herpes, to be honest. It's itchy bumps that are not comfortable. But if you have a cold sore, you have herpes in your mouth, and you just shouldn't kiss someone when you have a cold sore on your mouth. Or touch your face them in any way. Most people get it in childhood, to be honest. If like your mother had a cold sore and kissed you on the head when you were an infant, or like kissed your face or whatever, then you might have gotten a cold sore in that way. There was a really virulent outbreak in Brooklyn Orthodoxy, I think a couple of years ago, because there were moils who had cold sores who were using their mouths to suck the blood. And so one of the advice for that sort of situation is to see if your rabbi will allow you to use a straw for that, to make sure that you're not coming in contact with an infant's genitals if you have a cold sore on your face, because then that infant is going to grow up with genital herpes, which is not a pleasant situation for a child to deal with. So sorry, I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, but one thing to make sure you do, first of all, to get yourself regularly tested. If you come out into secular lifestyle and discover that you like casual sex and sleeping with a number of people, that's great. But something you should be careful to do is to get tested every 6 months is what people recommend. Again, you can just go to your gynecologist or your general practitioner. But also you can go to an STI clinic, which is something that many large cities have. If you sort of search your city name and STI clinic, then you might get some good information. One person asked, are there safe ways to have sex even after a partner disclosed? And the answer is absolutely yes, and I will get to that in half a second. I just want to finish talking about testing first. So you can get tested, and you can make sure your partners get tested. Something that happens sometimes in bigger cities with people who are in multiple relationships is you have your every 6 month testing date with your partner. So if you and your partner both need to get tested because you both have sex with multiple people, then you go have a night out in the town. You go to the STI clinic, you both get tested, and you go out for dinner after that, because it's a way to defeat the stigma of casual sex and looking into having an STI. It's making sure that you are being safe about it. So someone asked, does Planned Parenthood do this testing and service all genders at no cost? The answer is yes. Planned Parenthood does do that testing. Planned Parenthood is a clinic that does a lot of reproductive health work. And there are Planned Parenthoods in many big cities, especially on the East and West Coast. It's a little harder to find them in the center of the country because they're so heavily regulated, which is a conversation for another time. But you can walk into a Planned Parenthood. So again, what I would recommend if you want to get tested to see if you have an STI is to Google your city name and STI testing or STD testing or STD clinic. These are all keywords that you can type into Google, and it should give you some pretty good advice on what to look for, on where to go to get tested. So again, there was that previous question about if a partner does have an STD, what are ways that you can lessen the chances of exposure back and forth. And the number one best way to avoid getting an STD from a partner is to use barrier methods of protection. So someone said, how perfect to coincide your lecture with World AIDS Day. Yes, reducing the spread of AIDS is one of my goals in life. So if you have an infection that can be treated, probably what your doctor will do is give you a cream or an oral medication or what have you, and say, you know, please don't have sex with anybody for 1 week for you to no longer become contagious, or it might be longer than that depending on how long the infection has spread or what have you. So your doctor will tell you if it is something that can be gotten rid of. If it's something like herpes that you have forever, which is fine again, the ways to avoid passing that on are, number one, take medication to reduce your risk of spreading. If you have herpes, you can actually take medication that will lower your viral shedding, which means like the amount of the virus that your skin is letting off, which makes it less likely for a partner to get that infection. Two, if somebody has open sores, if you see a cold sore on their mouth or a sore on their genitals, don't have sex with them during that period. Or if you do, to use barrier method protection. There are four main kinds of barrier method protection. Those four main kinds are the external condom. So it's a condom that goes on a penis. It's the condom that you've probably heard of. It's fairly common. You can buy them at most drugstores. There is an internal condom, which goes inside someone's vagina. You just sort of put it in there and leave it there, and you can have sex with a person, not indefinitely, you just leave it there for the entirety of the sexual encounter, and you can have sex with someone who has that internal condom. Unfortunately, due to some very recent legislature shifting around, you need to get a prescription for an internal condom from your doctor, but it's pretty easy to get. Just say, hey, I would like, they call it the female condom. Just say, hey, I'd like a female condom. Can you write me a prescription for that? And it's very, very easy to get. The third good method of protection is to use a dental dam. A dental dam is just a sheet of latex about this big that you can lay over your partner's genitals in order to perform oral sex on them. So if somebody has a vulva, you can put the dental dam over their vulva and you can still lick them without exchanging fluids. And these things can still feel good, by the way. If you put some lubrication down beneath it, it'll still slide over your partner's genitals. It'll still feel good. But it prevents you from transferring fluid like vaginal fluid or semen or spit, which can contain STI bacteria or viruses. And the fourth kind of barrier method that you can use is a regular old latex or vinyl glove, just like you'd see in a doctor's office or you might use to dye your hair. You can put those on your hands to perform digital manipulation, or like fingering or hand jobs are more common secular and lifestyle phrases, is to, like, you know, if you finger somebody or you touch their penis. And so if you want to make sure that you're not getting any fluids on your skin, you can wear a glove. And all of these seem very clunky, and you might encounter people who are like, no, I don't use condoms, those aren't sexy. And you're like, well, you know what isn't sexy? STDs. Those aren't sexy either. And there are definitely ways to make it sexy. I saw a clip at one point of a woman like snapping on a black vinyl glove, and it was like this very sexual snap of the vinyl and like the sexy look on her face. There are ways to make any kind of sexual safety be sexy. So if that's something you're concerned about, just go into it with like full intention and delight. Just be like really excited to be safe with your partner, which sounds like a really dorky thing, but is actually something which a lot of people practice, is this very sexy way of being sexually safe with people. There's nothing less sexy than being worried about getting an STI or getting pregnant. And getting pregnant is something else that you can avoid if you use the internal condom or the external condom, also known as the female condom or like the regular condom that you put in your penis. Those are barrier methods that prevent you from getting pregnant. There are a whole lot of different kinds of birth control, which really might not be what everybody here is interested in knowing about. So if people have individual questions about birth control, hit me up later, or we can Google that question together, or you can talk to your doctor about it. But really, two great things to avoid during sex are STIs and unwanted pregnancy. Both of those are a real mood killer, and nobody's going to want to have some fun sex if that's all they're worried about. So really, you should just protect yourself in advance, and then you don't have to worry about it. Be like, yep, you're on oral birth control, I've got a condom, we're good to go, not worried about getting pregnant or transmitting an STI. People feel that they don't know how to ask that question when they meet somebody new and they're like, ooh, I don't know if I can ask this person about when they were last tested. You probably shouldn't sleep with them then, is my general advice. If you're not sure, if you feel comfortable asking somebody about how they've been tested. Oops. Sorry, I just opened up another tab to look at more questions, and I apologize that some sound was coming from that. I apologize. I see that there are more questions on this screen. Oh, great. I love it. Wonderful. Someone wrote down the 4 kinds of condoms. Great. Someone asked if I have any condoms or female condoms handy to show. I don't actually. I'm so sorry. I'm at my computer. I could Google the pictures and just sort of give you links to them in the chat if that would help people out. Let me write down a note to do that. I don't want to distract myself too much right now Googling. I'm going to write condom images. We do this chat again. This is really great to know. I'll make sure that I have those on hand to show you what they actually look like. So many tabs now. I don't know why my computer has decided that these questions are not all supposed to be on the same chain. How bizarre. Another question somebody asked if there are any safety or hygiene precautions for masturbation. Great question. Hygiene, as long as you're alone, you're not masturbating with another person in your bed or with their hands on you, you really don't have to worry about safety because there's nothing that could go wrong. Your body will tell you when to stop masturbating. It might be something that you are concerned would be bad for your body. It's not. Masturbating is great. It makes you feel good. It takes the edge off sexual frustration if you can't find a partner. There are a lot of good reasons to masturbate. If you masturbate too much, which a lot of people do, by the way, when they first discover their bodies, they masturbate too much, you might get sore and it feels unpleasant and your body's like, you're rubbing me too much, please stop. And then you can just stop, and that's great. So that's really the only safety precaution, is your body isn't going to get hurt. And that just might be from literally rubbing your skin too much. If you, rubbed your arm too often, it might hurt you as well. I don't know why anyone would be rubbing their arm frequently. That was a random example that I popped up with. But yeah, so masturbating alone, there isn't any safety concern. For hygiene-wise, you just want to make sure that you wash your hands afterwards. Oh, I see someone just said that. Great. Wash your hands because it's polite to not touch someone with semen or vaginal fluids on your hands. That doesn't seem like a very nice way to shake somebody's hand later in the day. Just keep yourself generally clean the same way you would after you go to the bathroom. They're both private. They're not shameful. They're things we do with our bodies. Just make sure you're being hygienic and not transmitting fluids from masturbation to another person. If you are a person with a penis and you masturbate and there's semen everywhere, you probably want to clean up after that. So your partner or parent doesn't have to do the wash and then it's gross. That doesn't seem very kind. Oh, someone asked if you should wash your hands beforehand. That's a really good question. I think it depends on how you masturbate. People with penises, honestly, there's not much worry. There isn't much that goes into the urethra. As long as your hands aren't sticky or covered in gross stuff from outside, there's not much you can do to a penis, to be honest. They're pretty safe from infections. Don't go, putting dirt in your urethra. I'm putting really random things out there, I guess. But generally, if you have a penis, you could rinse your hands beforehand to make sure there isn't visibly caked on gunk, but there isn't much you can do to a penis. If you have a vulva and vagina, it might be worthwhile to wash your hands because it's a little easier for us to get infections or for dirt to build up in unpleasant ways. So it is kind of nice to wash your hands. Someone else mentioned that if you have a sex toy, which not everybody does, some people just masturbate with their hands, which is totally fine. If you have a sex toy, by the way, there's a lot of information on what kinds of sex toys are safe or not. Please make sure they're silicone if you can. That's the best kind of toy to put around your genitals. You want to wash them after you use them, and honestly beforehand also in case some dust gets on them. Just because the fluids from your genitals can, if you leave something gross for too long, it can get bacteria on it or whatever. You just want to make sure you're not putting a lot of bacteria all over your genitals. That's just sort of a general, that sounds like an unpleasant time for everybody, is to just shove a lot of bacteria in your genitals. So yeah, if you are using a sex toy, you do want to clean that pretty thoroughly. If it's silicone, you can actually boil it. But again, there's a whole lot of information about sex toy safety. In fact, that is a whole post that I wrote up. I've got an article about very basic sex toy safety. So why don't I write myself a note and I will give that to the organizer of this group. And if anyone has questions about sex toy safety, then the organizer of the group can forward this on to them. So let me write that note down. Great. So that is just some basic information about the safety of masturbating. If you are masturbating with another person, which by the way, you're definitely allowed to do if you're not ready to have intercourse or sexual contact with somebody, you can masturbate with them in the bed, and that is a way to build intimacy with someone. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to actual sexual contact. So you can masturbate in a bed with somebody, and the ways that you want to make sure to be safe is just like we talked about that fluid transfer situation. You want to make sure someone doesn't have an STI before you interact physically with their genitals. So that's just something to keep in mind. So some questions popped up. One person asked, is there something wrong if someone does not need or enjoy porn? Not at all. A lot of people have a healthy imagination, or they enjoy thinking about partners or people that they've met, or nothing at all. Masturbating can just feel physically good without you needing to have something in your mind. So a lot of people don't like porn, and that is just fine. Some people find porn degrading because most mainstream porn is very unpleasantly depicting of women generally, and so some people might not like porn because they're like, oh gross, that woman is being super degraded in that movie. That's totally your right, but if you like porn, that's also great. There's a whole host of information about ethical porn to make sure that you are paying for pornography that pays the actors so that they're actually getting money out of it. That's pretty important because it's a job just like any other job, but not everybody has to like porn, and that's just fine. There's nothing weird at all about that. Somebody else asked a question, is it socially acceptable to discuss your habits when others are talking about their sex life? So that's a concept about reading the room, and there's sort of two sides to this. One, if you're in a social group where everybody is talking about their sex life, you can talk about yours too. Or if everyone's talking about their sex life and they look at you, you can be like, well, I don't actually have sex, I don't like it. And then that maybe comes into that whole conversation about asexuality, and you have to be like, hey, stop asking me rude questions, it's a valid lifestyle. Come on. So if everybody is talking about sex and looks to you to talk about it also, you are permitted to, although you don't have to. You can always say, I'm fine listening to it, but it makes me uncomfortable to also talk about it. And people should respect those boundaries. It's really important that people respect your boundaries. Something that does happen sometimes when women are discussing their sex lives together is that then men jump in and talk about their sex lives too. And I know it seems unfair, but that's not always the right thing to do. Sometimes women want to be able to talk about sex without men talking about how much that arouses them or what their sex lives are like, because women are sort of socially bombarded with the sexual imagery from men, where men are saying, I deserve to have sex with women. I deserve for women to know about my sex life, and they feel very entitled about it. Women often look for spaces where women can talk to other women about sex. So if you are a man or someone who looks like a man, and you see that there's a conversation where people talk about sex, maybe give it some time to make sure people are actually interested in you talking about your sex life also. This is not in an attempt to silence you. This is merely making sure that you are not crossing someone's social boundaries in a way that would make them feel uncomfortable. We really want to avoid making people feel uncomfortable when we're talking about sex. So I'm going to look through these tabs to make sure there aren't any questions before I move on to another topic. Oh, I do see that there is another question. Great, love it. Let me read it out loud. The question is, can you explain the phenomenon of men becoming aroused from a cat fight? And how can I protect myself when I know I'm serving to fulfill someone's fantasy just by existing? This question is by someone who I believe is female presenting, so to give a little bit of context to that question. The phenomenon of men becoming aroused by a cat fight. Well, I don't want to just say some men are gross, so that would be a very cheap answer, I think. I believe the answer is that men often see women as just sort of a vehicle for their sexual fantasies. So when two women are interacting physically, a cat fight, if you will, which is often women sort of sniping at each other verbally or literally physically fighting with each other, men can get excited because they see this as like, there are a lot of pornographies that begin that way, to be honest, of like women fighting and then suddenly they begin having sex with each other. And so men are like, the exploration of my favorite pornography come to life right here in front of me. Wow. And then they're really disrespectful about it because it's actually two women who are having like a social problem with each other, who are fighting. Rude for those men to treat it like a sexual concept, but unfortunately that does happen sometimes. And the other question was, how can I protect myself when I know I'm serving to fulfill someone's fantasy just by existing? Ooh, that's a rough one that I really wish I had a good answer to. I hate to tell you, but people are going to objectify you, and it's going to be really awful when you find out that they objectified you non-consensually. I unfortunately don't have a solution for that. That's a huge problem in the society where we live, because people, usually men, feel entitled to the existence of women as sex objects. I will very briefly talk about objectification, in fact. If I don't want to use gendered language here because I think this can happen in sort of all cases. This might feel like a very male-female thing, but really it happens all around. If you see someone attractive walking by and your first thought is, wow, I would love to have sex with that person, that thought is fine. Let me be really quite clear with you. Wanting to have sex with someone, even a stranger or a friend, as long as that thought is in your head, it's fine. There are two ethical types of objectification, of finding somebody sexy who's just like around you. The first one is secret objectification, and the second one is consensual objectification. So if somebody sexy walks by, don't do this. Because they can see you staring and it will make them feel extremely uncomfortable. Don't comment. Don't say, hey, sexy, how's it going? Don't say, damn, you look fine. None of that very uncomfortable language. That's just super unpleasant. And really, nobody wants to hear that about them. It's not flattering. It's not a compliment. It's not a compliment. If you tell someone they look sexy, boy, is that not a compliment. If you like the way someone is dressed, you can be like, wow, that's a very nice dress. It's a very pretty color or what have you. But don't say, damn, that dress makes you look sexy. You can sort of see that there's a difference in language here. So if you find somebody sexually attractive, don't let it show on your face. Don't say anything out of your mouth. They don't need to be a part of your sexual fantasy. They just don't. Just keep it in your head. Think about it later. You're even allowed, that person that passed you on the street that was very sexually attractive, you can think about them when you're masturbating later. That's fine. Just don't tell them about it. They don't have to be a part of your sexual fantasy. That would be super rude to do that. So that is secret objectification. Someone asked, just to quickly go aside, that dress looks really good on you. That's still talking about their body. I'm going to put a solid no on that. What you can compliment is the choice somebody made. Like, wow, that, your headband is really a nice pattern, or it makes, what you did with your hair is great. You're complimenting the choice somebody made and what they did with their hair or on the garment that they wore. But if you say that looks really good on you, you're addressing their body and not the choice that they made about their appearance. So I guess that's sort of a difference there, is compliment a choice that someone has made and not the appearance that came from it. It maybe seems a little bit silly to have that difference there, but it's pretty important because people can feel very uncomfortable when you're just commenting on their bodies without their permission. So someone just asked a question, which is, gosh, just a great segue into my next concept, which is the other kind of objectification that's okay, is consensual objectification. Often people who are friends or partners who are in romantic relationships are like, dang, you look great. You look so fine in that dress. That is fine as long as it makes the person feel good. Don't do that to strangers. Don't do that to strangers. It's not good to do it to strangers. But you can absolutely, the person said, can there be a situation where you can objectify the person, perhaps if it's done in teasing or flirting or friend? Yes, as long as you know that it won't make that person feel uncomfortable. That's really, comfort is key. It's something we're going to go over a lot of times here. Comfort is the most important thing. Make sure that somebody doesn't feel super awkward or miserable when you use those words. Someone said, I complimented a dude at Walmart. Wow, that shirt is gorgeous. I actually love his shirt and would have gotten it for myself. My friend kicked me to pieces about it. You never say gorgeous to a dude. I think that was a little rude of your friend, honestly. I think gorgeous is a totally fine word to use for a guy. It might have made him feel uncomfortable. I don't want to be like, well, that's his problem. Because again, comfort is key. I guess that sort of really depends on who you're talking to. I think calling a garment on a man gorgeous is just fine, but if it makes him feel really uncomfortable, you might be like, that is a handsome shirt you have there. I'm not really sure, I think. Again, it depends on the person. So like my feminist spirit wants to be like, use gorgeous wherever you want. Like, screw men who think that gorgeous is a bad word. Who cares what those men think? But also, sort of part of one of the reasons you're in this social skills group is to find out what will help you integrate a little bit better. So while, again, my like outward feminist heart says, use whatever language you want to use that feels accurate to you, also you're kind of trying to figure out how to blend in a little bit. So you might not use the word gorgeous for a man if you don't want that man to feel uncomfortable about it, because some men do feel uncomfortable with language like that. So again, you can objectify a partner as long as they feel good about it. You can even objectify them like very heavily if you are a person, if your partner has breasts and you just want to like bury your face in those breasts, like, listen, as long as your partner is good with that, you can totally objectify their body parts as long as it doesn't make them feel uncomfortable and they get to do it back to you. Or you're okay with them doing it back to you. Again, relationships can be unbalanced as long as everyone feels okay with it. So yeah, those are the two ways where it's okay to objectify somebody. One, if it's secret, it stays in your head. Listen, you see someone sexy walking by and you think how sexy they are and how you'd love to have sex with them, fine. Keep it inside your head. Make sure that they never, ever know. There's a little bit of a wiggly line when it comes to talking to your friends about it. If you're like out with some friends, someone really hot walks by and you're like, oh my God, isn't he hot? First of all, he might hear you. And second of all, one of your friends might feel uncomfortable. That friend might be like, oh, he just objectified someone. That's so strange. I mean, it feel weird. So that really goes right into that consensual objectification. For your for finding somebody sexy and wanting to express it or feeling it inside yourself, it has to be both. It has to be absolutely consensual, and if it's not consensual, it has to be secret inside your own head. There are no thought crimes. You can think whatever you want. Don't make people uncomfortable is the number one key when it comes to objectifying people. So I'm going to check a couple of tabs to make sure that I'm not missing any questions, again, because they keep popping up in all these different tabs for some reason. Then I'm going to move on to my next topic. Great. Okay, it doesn't look like I'm missing anything. Wonderful. If I am, I think I'll get a little pop-up in my corner telling me which tab I'm missing it from, which is great. So I get a couple of questions about is how to begin to date somebody. So how fast should you move? What should your dating milestones be? And the sort of the very short answer is there is no firmly established timeline. There's no book that says do this for 3 weeks, do this for 3 months, do this for half a year. There's no rule on how long dating should last. What you want to make sure you're doing is checking in on the comfort level of all of the people who are involved. So you might say, hey, I think you're pretty cute and I'd like to take you out on a date. Are you okay with that? Or you might say, hey, we've been dating for 3 months now or 3 weeks now. I would like to have sex with you. Is this a conversation you feel comfortable having? Do you possibly want to have sex with me at some point? And I know it seems silly to use your words that explicitly, and some people think that it isn't sexy to use your words that explicitly, but it is really the number one best way to make sure that you're not making someone feel uncomfortable is to ask them if they feel comfortable. Just check in a lot. You can ask before you kiss somebody. I know movies make it seem like that's not sexy, but there are really sexy ways to ask for consent. Ooh, that's another thing I'm going to write down. I just want to give you guys a lot of material that you can look at in the future. There's a pretty good sex blogger who came out with a list of 50 ways to ask for consent. So 50 ways to consent. Poor piece of paper is getting scribbled all over. So there are definitely sexy and congruous ways to make sure that someone is okay with what you're doing. You can sexily whisper hey, I think you're really attractive. Can I kiss you now? Or you're beautiful. Do you mind if I take your shirt off? Or of your body? How do you feel about that? And all of these are like sexy ways that you can integrate asking for consent and checking in to make sure people are comfortable with what's going on. You never want to initiate physical contact with someone without checking. So hugging everybody else and not checking, and that can be okay. But if you're one-on-one with somebody watching a movie and you want to like put your hand on their thigh, you can sort of do that more tentatively. You can like, hey, I want to put my hand on you. Is that okay? Because even people get frozen up and don't know how to say no if they're not comfortable with something. If you just like put your hands on their knee and slide it up their leg, thinking that they'll tell you to stop, they don't know how to say stop. So the best thing to do is to ask first. I think I actually want to be pretty clear about that. If you do something and try to ramp it up without using your words, then someone might not know how to tell you that they're uncomfortable. That's a very difficult thing for people to do. Even in the secular lifestyle, people are not always good at using their words when it comes to sex because sex is such a taboo topic. People feel so uncomfortable talking about it. You have to be, I mean, your partner should do it too, but you've got to be the one to break that barrier, to check with your words before you do something with somebody. Because if you don't check, they might not know how to be like, oh, I really don't like that your hand is on my breast. This makes me feel really uncomfortable. What do I do? What do I say? I guess I'm just going to let her put her hand on my breast. And not sure what to do in that situation. So there are just like really good, smooth ways that you can ask if you can touch somebody's body. You should do that, including kissing. So somebody asked earlier, when is it appropriate to touch or kiss and become intimate? And the answer is when you and your partner are both ready to. You don't have to jump into sex right away, but you can jump into sex right away. Those are both options available to you. It all depends on what feels right to you, and it's kind of difficult to figure out what feels right. One of the things to look into is, what are your motivations? Why do you want to have sex? Is it just to make your body feel good? Great, make your body feel good is a good way to have sex. Is it because you want human intimacy and you want to connect with somebody in that close way? All right, that's also a good reason to have sex. Is it because you love your partner very much and you want to become closer to them in a way that involves making each other's bodies feel good? Also great. Most motivations for sex are actually really good motivations. It can be a casual or serious activity depending on how you feel, but what's really important is checking in with yourself first. If your partner asks you to have sex, even if their reasons are good, if yours aren't, don't do it. As a sex educator and as a feminist, I want to be like, sex is great, everyone should have it all the time if you want to. Also, sex can have a lot of consequences. It can bring STIs, it can bring pregnancy, it can bring trauma. There are a lot of things that can come along with sex because it can be a serious activity. And so what I want to make sure that all of you are doing is checking in with yourselves and finding out what your motivation is. If your motivation is just to make your partner feel good, you probably shouldn't do it, to be honest. That's kind of more complicated, actually. If you love your partner and you don't think you're going to be traumatized by it, like maybe you could have sex to make them feel good, but not if it's your first time or you're new at it and you don't like it very much. That's not really a good reason to have sex, it's just to make somebody else feel good. It's important to listen to yourself. Checking in with yourself is so valuable. Heck, you can even write pro-con lists. I write lists all the time, even about things like sex. I know it seems very funny. Checking in with yourself is so valuable. I'm so sorry about that feedback. Every time I try to refresh the questions, I forget to mute it for a second. Somebody asked, let me scroll down to see it more visually. What is the American culture way to make it known that a social encounter is specifically for having sex? I think ethically there isn't, because you could even say, hey, do you want to come back to my apartment to have sex with me? And that could be explicit, right? And that person might be like, yeah, that sounds great. And then they come back to your apartment and realize that they don't want to have sex with you. Sex is off the table then. If they, at any point someone can revoke consent. So I would be pretty clear. American culture way is the question. So I might actually be the wrong sex researcher to tell you the American culture way to invite someone to have sex. I am known as a fairly awkward person, to be perfectly honest, and I am very explicit about things. I will say things like, wow, I find you very attractive. Would you like to have sex with me? Or, hey, this is really fun. This date has been great. Do you want to make out and go back to my place and see where that leads? Those are really valid ways that you can ask someone if they want to sort of see where things develop. You should, again, check before every stage. Do you want to do this? Is this okay? Do you like it when actually, that's a pretty sexy way to, do you like it when I nibble on your neck? Is like a sexy way of asking if somebody wants you to do that thing. But yeah, so the question is, what is the American culture way to make it known that a social encounter is specifically for having sex? I don't know if there's a consistent one, which, and I'm gonna drop to somber for a moment, is one of the reasons that there are a lot of rapes in this country, is because one person thinks they have clearly communicated this social situation is for sex, and the other person didn't pick up on that because it wasn't explicit. One person thinks, do you want to come up to my apartment for a cup of coffee? Is like a very explicit way of being like, hey, come on into my bedroom, or like, do you want to snuggle on my bed? Do you want to make out? Feel like ways of indicating that you want to have sex with someone. That person is like, snuggling and making out, that sounds great. And then suddenly they're having sex and they don't know why or when that happened. So that's one of the benefits of being very explicit and clear about what you actually want to happen in your encounter from a person, to make sure that there are no misunderstandings, that you thought you were going to have sex and they didn't think so, or vice versa. Or even that you just thought something was a friendly hangout and they thought it was a date. You get to ask, like, you know, hey, is this a date? That's a question you can ask. And sort of transitioning there, someone asked how to tell someone I'm not interested or not my type. Number one, don't be rude. Don't be like, hey, you're super ugly, I don't want to date you. I know that seems random, but still, how to tell someone I'm not interested. You can just say, hey, I'm really flattered that you're into me, but I don't think I want to go on a date with you. And that can hurt someone's feelings, but as long as you are honest and not rude, that's really the best thing to say is, no, thank you. Or, thanks so much for asking, but this isn't a time, you know, okay. So if you are trying to like escape from a situation that feels awkward, you can be like, ooh, I'm not into dating right now. Like my life is a little bit too busy, or what have you. If you, especially women, if you feel unsafe, listen, you can tell people you have a boyfriend. I know that it's awful that men won't listen unless you say I have a boyfriend, but like, you should do it. Get out of a situation that feels uncomfortable if someone's hitting on you that you don't want. So there are two questions. I'm going to flip-flop them just to make sure. Right. So if I understand correctly, even at the risk of being seen as an explicit creep who's coming on too strong, it's better to overstate it. Well, you also want to read so you don't want to go up to a stranger and say, hello, I find you attractive. Would you like to have sexual intercourse with me? What you want to do is check things in incremental steps. So, for example, if you think someone is attractive, you might do something like be close to them when you're talking, have your body angled towards them. And if they're reciprocating that, then maybe you can say, hey, this seems really fun. Do you mind if I like put my arm around you while we're on this couch watching a movie? Or you might say, ooh, we're having this meal together. Can I kiss you now? You don't jump right into sex or touching their breasts or fondling their penis or any of those things. You want to slowly increase what is comfortable. This is not quite the same as the casual sex scene, which I can address in a little bit if people are curious about, you know, how you go out and just find someone to have sex with. But when it comes to romance and slow building, then slow building is sort of your best chance to make sure that someone is comfortable with every one of the steps you are taking. I've got a lot of questions here, which is great. How do I know if someone is flirting with me? By the way, I haven't asked the question. So let me just, I'll read this one back. I was friendly with a cute barista girl at a coffee shop. She asked for my number and then said maybe we can go see the Christmas lights in some neighborhood sometime. She also texted me and asked if I was coming to their event the past Friday. So it wasn't just empty words. Is she into me or is she just being friendly? I don't know. To be honest, that's a really tough one. If she asked for your number, that's a pretty good sign that someone might be into you. What you might do, if you're not interested at all, you can ignore the flirting signs, sort of, until she asks an explicit question or puts her arm around you, and then you can say, oh, I think you've misunderstood. I'm so sorry. I'm not interested in you for these reasons. If you are interested, great. You know, you can initiate or you can let her initiate. Again, those small incremental steps. It can be sort of difficult and awkward to figure out if someone is flirting or not. There are, in fact, a couple of questions about that here. How do I know if someone's flirting with me? I don't usually know until someone tells me, hey, that person was totally into you. It was possible for me to be flirting and not realize it. So again, that's sort of tough because there are a lot of different social concepts about what flirting is. What looks like flirting to one person is not necessarily flirting to another person, often, and I'm going to use some gendered language here, but this is really applicable in a number of situations, when women are friendly, just like, hey, how's it going? You want to grab a drink sometime? Let's hang out. Or even, how was your day? Or, wow, your dog is really cute. Any words that are just really friendly conversation starters, men will often. There's not a solution to that socially, unfortunately. This conversation we right now are hearing is not going to fix the United States problem with sexual aggression. There's not much I can do about that, I'm afraid. So I think really your best bet is to just try to get as much information as possible. Even people who have been involved in the secular lifestyle their entire lives still go, wait, that person was into me? I didn't even realize it. It's just a thing that happens, and there's not a fix. I think your best bet is just, again, if you are interested, to take slow incremental steps. If someone else is interested in you and you didn't realize it, you can go back and be like, hey, were you flirting with me? Because I'm actually interested in you. I missed those signals, but I think you're really cute. And it can be sort of a fun, awkward starter offer where you're just like, oh gosh, I totally missed those signals. You want to grab a drink sometime? That was pretty funny how that happened. How to tell if someone's flirting with you? I think you can try to read their body language. If they're very close to you, if they're making eye contact with you. Magazines say if people are like looking at your lips or touching their faces a lot, those are signals that someone might be flirting with you. But they're not tried and true. People are just doing those things. So there's no surefire way to tell if someone's flirting with you unless they attempt to initiate those slow incremental steps towards romance or sex. Sorry that there's no solid answer there. It really depends on the person. I'm just going to check the different tabs, make sure I'm not missing any questions. It doesn't look like I am. So yeah, again, our best bet is generally just to not make people uncomfortable, try to take small steps, and try to pay attention to what people are doing with their bodies and their voices. Not everybody asks before just touching and touching, like shoulders or wrists or what have you. So if someone if someone's really close to you and they're like putting their hands on your shoulder, or like, so you said something funny and they like pat you on the knee, then look, that's way of they're getting close to you. So these are all social signals to read. And if you're uncomfortable, freeze and back up, and they should respect it. They won't always, unfortunately, but if you don't know how to get out of a situation that feels flirty, take a couple steps back. Don't touch them. When they touch you, you can sort of laugh uncomfortably and step aside. There are a lot of ways to disengage without awkwardly being like, hey, stop flirting with me, because then they'll be like, I wasn't flirting with you. You're imagining it, and then it becomes really contentious. So unfortunately, in this culture, one of the things we have to do is sort of downscale what feels like interest and be less explicit about it. It's tough. I wish everyone were as verbally explicit as my friend group. That would make life a lot easier, but it isn't. So we really just have to sort of do our best reading cues and using our own body language, either being shut off and moving away from someone, or having open body language and leading into someone and touching your face. And there are all of these clues that you're into somebody. Somebody said, in the Finnish world, showing off your mother's kugel is a very big deal. It's kind of delightful. Please talk about the social norms of referencing someone else other than your talents when building a relationship. Social norms of referencing someone else. Well, you might say, do you want to come meet my family? You might say, do you want to meet my roommates or spend time with my friends? When you introduce someone important to you, it's like a romantic partner, to the other people who are important in your life, that's a way to show them that you mean a lot. And in fact, if you're involved with someone who won't introduce you to their loved ones, it's kind of a warning sign that they're trying to keep you secret. You want a healthy relationship where everyone feels comfortable sort of building a community. That is what you're sort of looking for out of a long-term relationship. So social norms in the secular world are also kind of similar in that you want to reference your family, talk about your family with them, talk about them to your family. You could say like, oh, I was talking with my mom on the phone the other week and I mentioned that funny thing that you did. And then they know that you're important to them. Thank you so much for being patient with me as I drink so much water. I'm talking a lot. Oh, we've been doing this for almost an hour and a half. That's so exciting. So that is a bunch of information about flirting and building intimacy. I'll just go through those key points once more. Body language, try to read the room, make sure you're not making someone uncomfortable, and move up in intimacy in slow incremental steps to make sure you're not making someone uncomfortable. So that's sort of romance building. If you want to, let's see, I understand it's a warning sign not to introduce family or loved ones. What if I talk about family, etc., but I can't bring a girl home? You can say that honestly. You can explain that your life makes it really difficult because of religious reasons or family difficulties. It's not a deal breaker to not introduce a partner to your family as long as you explain why. Some people have bad relationships with their families, and your partners should understand that. Just be very clear about it. What you don't want to make them feel like is that you're hiding them because of them. You can explain, listen, if I brought you home to my mom, there would be a fight and it would be really uncomfortable. You know, I'm interested in interacting with you in the future. There's nothing I can do about the way that my mother says things, and I think it would be best if you didn't come to my house. And you can just sort of have that conversation with your partner. Now, this whole conversation that I had sort of gets, like, this whole long timeline of increasing intimacy gets way shortened if you want to pick somebody up for casual sex. All of those slow incremental steps become much faster, bigger steps when you are jumping into casual sex. And I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule. What I just want to make sure happens is, number one, you're having casual sex for the right reasons. Just like I want to make sure you're having like intimate, emotional relationship sex for the right reasons. Like, I want my body to feel good, and I want my body to feel good by touching my genitals to another person's genitals. That will make me feel great tonight. So make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And two, make sure you're being explicit. Like, hey, you're hot, wanna fuck, is honestly something that you could say to somebody in a sexually explicit scenario. There are sex clubs that exists. You could do it in a bar where a lot of people are hooking up, but you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I just say try to read the room because that seems so vague. It really depends on where you are and where you're going. If someone was like, if some friend of yours said, hey, come with me to this thing, everybody has sex at this event, great. Then that might be a place where you can say, you're hot, wanna fuck. Excuse my language. Or I find you very attractive. Would you like to have sexual intercourse back in my hotel room? Or, wow, you're really pretty. Can I make out with you for a while? Or all of those things. Just make sure you're explicit about it. And the third really important thing is to be not drunk, and make sure your partner's not drunk, because drunk people cannot consent to sex. If you are in a long-term relationship where you trust each other and you know each other's boundaries and all of these things are very clear and you know where you stand with this partner, you could say, you know, have a couple of drinks or even be very drunk, as long as you are both very comfortable with each other's existing boundaries. But if this is a casual sex thing or a new relationship where you're not very aware of each other's boundaries, you cannot be drunk, neither can your partner. If you think someone is hot and they're drunk, you can't have sex with them. You can't have sex with them. They can't consent. Their boundaries are shifted. They are not capable of maintaining appropriate, an internet disruption, sorry. So yeah, I'll go through that. Just make sure that people aren't drunk. That's really the most important thing. It looks like I might have missed a question in a panel somewhere. Give me a second in one of these tabs. I don't know if I see the question that they're mentioning. Give me 1 second to look for it. Someone's question about boundaries. Oh, I see a question that was posted earlier. Let me talk about boundaries really quickly. That's great. And they also mentioned that we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes. So I'll try to smush this as best I can. There's so much to talk about. FYI, I'm happy to do this multiple times. I mentioned that to the organizers of this group. So if I didn't hit anything that's important, then I can hit that in the future. So something to talk about are your boundaries and other people's boundaries. Maintaining your own boundaries involves being clear and kind of putting your foot down sometimes. So what that means is if someone is making you physically uncomfortable, is explicitly saying, I feel really uncomfortable with this. Can you please stop touching me? And someone might say that to you also. And a way to make sure you are respecting other people's boundaries is a lot of things just involve sort of moving in slow steps or checking in before you do something. Like we were talking about physical boundaries before. You can say to a friend, wow, you know, that was such a great presentation you just put on. Can I give you a hug? And you can express joy at physical interactions while asking for consent. That's a very good way to check for consent, is to be excited about it. Like, oh my gosh, we're all so happy. Can I hug you? Or I haven't seen you in so long. I miss you. Can I kiss you? All of those things are things you can ask in excited ways that don't just ask clinical. May I wrap my arms around you? Sounds perhaps uncomfortably clinical, but with, obvious delight in your voice that you want to be interacting with this person, they can feel really good about you checking about physical boundaries. So that is one way to make sure that everyone is comfortable with physical boundaries. I'll make sure I'm not missing any more questions. So I'm going to refresh the screen, and it might briefly have that feedback situation, which we don't like. Oh no, it refreshed on mute. That's great. I didn't miss any questions, it looks like. So questions about emotional boundaries are a little difficult. Something I was talking about earlier today with some of the organizers of the group is something called the friend zone, which you might have heard. A lot of men who want to have sex with women, it's usually in that direction, are upset because they feel as if they have been friend zoned, that this person put up a boundary that they wanted to have sex with her and all she wants is to be friends with him, and they're bummed because they want to have sex. And I hate to say it, but that's a boundary that somebody puts up and that you need to respect. And it might feel yucky, but probably that woman also feels yucky that you girlfriend zoned her. That's sort of flipping that concept on its head, where you're like, oh man, she only sees me as a friend, not a sex partner. I feel pretty upset about that. And this woman is probably thinking, oh man, he only sees me as a sex partner and not a friend. Wow, that really sucks. I thought I had a good friendship here. Because friendship is really important, and to assume that somebody wants sex the same way that you want sex is a sort of implicit boundary cross. You have already stepped all over someone's boundaries if you assume that sex is going to happen in your relationship with them. It might feel like wasted time to try to cultivate a relationship for sex and have it not turn into that. So what you should probably do is be clear early in your relationship with someone, like, hey, I'm really enjoying this friendship. I'm attracted to you, and I might like to turn this into a romance, but if you're not interested in that, I still value our friendship. Make very clear that you still value the way that you're interacting with somebody. So that is a really important way to respect other people's boundaries, is to make sure that you're clear early on about what ways that you would like to interact with someone. Oh, I like those hearts. And two, to make clear that you value the way that you're already interacting. And if you don't, that's okay, but be prepared to lose someone in your life. If the only reason you want to hang out with somebody is to have sex with them, and they don't want to have sex with you, cut it off and leave. Don't hang around waiting for them to want to have sex with you. Well, maybe if maybe when she breaks up with this guy, she'll sleep with me. This guy's a total jerk. He doesn't deserve her. I'm so good to her. Maybe she'll realize that I'm the right one. Don't do that. Just don't do it. If the only reason you're staying friends with someone is because you want to have sex with them, don't stay friends with them, to be perfectly honest. That's a way to manipulate someone. It's not a valuable relationship for either of you. So don't do it. I just said don't do it a lot of times. I think that's sort of the bottom line about that. I'm going to go down my list real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything. So we're talking about how to signal interest and disinterest. Yep, body language, touching, etc. When is it appropriate to touch or kiss? Whenever that, great. How do I get to know or date someone? That's a really good question. Probably asking someone out for coffee is a really good start. Asking someone out for coffee is a really good way of hedging your bets about whether or not someone is interested in you. It's a very casual way of hanging out. Now, what that might mean is that person is like, is it a date? Is it not a date? And you might be wondering that too. Ooh, we're getting coffee. Do they think it's a date? Is it just a hang out? Who knows? And at that point, it doesn't matter. When it's someone who's just new, asking if you can get a drink with them, alcoholic if you drink alcohol, non-alcoholic if you don't, or if you don't, or if you want a cheaper option. Just getting a tea or a coffee is a really good way to find out more about a person, to discover if you even want to date someone. So that's a really good first step. And at the end of that coffee date, if you enjoyed yourself, here's actually my #1 tip, especially for men, because men overstep boundaries a lot, but for women too, who don't always understand social correctness. Don't ask someone for a second date while you're on the first date. Even if it seemed like it went really great, unless they initiate and went like, wow, I had a really good time, I want to see you again. Don't at the end of the date say, will you go out with me again? Or do you want to schedule something right now? Let's pull out our calendars, because they don't know how to get out of that situation. It can feel very uncomfortable to be right there in front of someone and say, ooh, actually, I didn't really enjoy myself. I don't want to see you again. They don't know if you're going to get mad or angry or mean. The best thing to do is exchange numbers and text them the next day or the day after that and say, that was really fun. Would you like to go out again? And that leaves them space to say, no, thank you, without doing it in front of your face and making everyone very uncomfortable. If that happens in reverse, if someone asks you, hey, do you want to go out again? You can say, no, thank you. A pretty good phrase to throw out there is, you know, I didn't really feel like there was any chemistry, but we could be friends if you want to. Although be warned, that person might not want to be friends. They just might want to have sex with you or be in a romantic relationship. You can say that there wasn't chemistry. You can say, no, thank you. You can say that was really fun, but I don't want to go out again. Just don't do it in person, because that can be very awkward if they want to decline. Someone asked, what is an appropriate apology when you've overstepped? Number one, make it about you and not them. You say, wow, I'm really sorry. I misunderstood, and I should have picked up on the thing that you said, or, you know, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings in that way, or I'm sorry, you know, I should have asked before touching you and I didn't, and that was very unkind of me. And don't throw yourself weeping on the ground in a puddle. Don't go, oh, I'm a terrible person. I violated your boundaries. This was horrible of me. How could I have done that? I'm the worst person in the world. Because then it falls on that person to comfort you. No, you're not a bad person. You're okay. It was a mistake. And someone who's just been hurt shouldn't feel obligated to comfort you who has just stepped someone's boundaries. So a simple but explicit apology where you say sorry, you explain what you're sorry for. You can say that you won't do it again another time, and then you're done with that apology. You do not make yourself out to be a terrible person, because then that person will feel obligated to comfort you, which isn't their obligation at all. So that is an appropriate apology when you've overstepped, is explicit, short, and then remove yourself from the situation. They might still want to be friends with you. That's totally valid, in which case you can still be friends and don't make that mistake again. Or you might have hurt them badly enough that they don't want to interact with you again. Also totally valid. You need to accept that. When people don't want to interact with you, you must accept that. Nobody is obligated ever to spend time with you. If you have a partner who doesn't spend time with you and it makes you feel yucky, dump them. It means they are not interested in you and they don't want to spend time on you. But nobody's obligated. Nobody has to keep interacting with you. And if that makes you feel yucky, then you probably shouldn't be with that person. The note that I wrote here is, remember that you're allowed to enjoy yourself. All of this seems really overwhelming. We're wrapping up right now, which is why I want to end on this note. This seems really overwhelming. There's so many rules about sex and dating and relationships, and it seems scary and unpleasant. You're allowed to enjoy yourself. You're allowed to go out in the world and look for social interactions that make you feel happy and fulfilled and good about yourself. You are allowed to look for things that make you feel good. I imagine the religious lifestyle is all about the obligation about minding yourself for your family and not embarrassing your family and sticking to these rigid rules of behavior. That's not a thing out in the secular world. Or if it is, then those are people that you shouldn't spend time with. You should only spend time with the people that make you feel good or people that you need to for work purposes. Unfortunately, sometimes we work with people that don't make us feel good, and that sucks. But we shouldn't have partners that put us down. We shouldn't have partners that try to pressure us into having sex. There are so many ways to feel great when you interact with another person. Ask questions and check in. It's all about using your words. I know sometimes there's a temptation to say, I already know this, I don't need to ask questions. Well, first of all, you're going to overstep if you do that. If you say you don't need to ask questions, you're probably wrong. I've been living a secular lifestyle my entire life, and I still ask a lot of questions to make sure that I'm not violating anybody's boundaries and to make sure that all of the people in my life are comfortable with the interactions that I have with them. So you can always ask questions. You really, really can. And just make sure that people around you are comfortable with things. Like, unfortunately, you might want something from someone that they don't want with you. That really stinks, and that can really hurt your feelings, and it sucks when that happens. It really, really does. but nobody's obligated to do anything with you. So your best bet when that happens, when you feel rejected or unloved or uncomfortable or unattractive, is to dust yourself off, take some recovery time to make yourself feel better, talk to some friends, and go try again. Go try to find a good human connection in another way. That's definitely the note that I want to end on, is that you deserve happiness by yourself or with another person. You don't have to date someone else. You can fulfill yourself just fine. But if you want someone to sleep in a bed with you, or to have sex with you, or to have a good human connection with you, you're allowed to look for that. You deserve happiness. So that is the end of my notes, I believe. I'm just going to once more scroll through the tabs that I have open where all of these different questions are popping up in different places for some reason. If anybody has any questions, ask them now as I look through these different tabs for questions. I do not see any more. It looks like we're good. If you have any questions, I'm actually going to, I'll make sure that the organizers have a way to contact me. And also, I did this through Facebook, so you can always message me. I'm really quite open to being contacted. I'm always happy to talk through tough situations or to give advice. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you guys, and I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon and evening, depending on which coast you are on. Shabbat shalom, you beautiful humans, and goodbye.